afternoon. I think we should do, we have more time this morning for questions and answers. So Dr. Finley, would you take charge briefly, maybe 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, questions and answers right now for our two guests this morning. Questions and answers, please.
Question down the front here, go ahead. I do have a question for Brother Rex though, but let me just move on.
I have a question for Mr. Thompson and it has to do with the struggle here about the location of the interpretive center. I wonder if you had a position on that. I'm going to tell you mine. But whether or not the voting rights interpretive center should be at Alabama State University.
I ain't got no problem with it being here or wherever they put them, no problem. I know that I ain't got no problem with it. I don't care one way or the other. Don't know nothing about it. Don't know nothing about politics. I fight for the total liberation and unification of Africa and socialism.
I've written an article.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I've written an article. It was in Alabama Today, ASU Today. It was in the newspaper too. First and foremost, I wanted the interpretive center to start in Lowndes County. No, Lowndes County. We talk about Selma and Montgomery. But the long...
There's an interpretive center in Lowndes County?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I thought first,
Yeah, right. Okay.
me and Bob Mance, you know, who was going to be first or whatever. We said Lowndes County. Because that's the longest trek. And we very seldom don't make that link. It's like Selma, Montgomery. And it's Lowndes County, and McCants talked about the Black Panther Party and all of that as a result of the Voting Rights March. And that's very key. Thanks, McCants. I wrote an article saying that ASU would be the best location. And my reason, number one, and Jan, did you see Dr. Frank? You saw that, right? Dr. Albert? Number one, ASU had the best business plan. Let's just deal with that. ASU offered the land, offered the building, already security in terms of maintenance, and all of that. The business plan, you can beat that. You know, we have to also learn how to deal with stuff on the business plan level. Number two, it will be such a resource for these children, for these students. They volunteers, work study, they can learn how to be curators. But beyond curators and architects and appraisers, they can learn architecture, landscape architecture. You know, I hope we can even plant a cotton field somewhere, preferably in Lowndes County, so that people who come and visit can pick cotton, you know, as part of the experience in the summer, and chopping.
I support that, but I was going to urge people, because of what took place and the students involved in, there's a resolution before the city council to now, after Alabama State has all of this thing. I just want to urge you all to send some letters to in support of the interpreters, and I'm going to send one.
I know, and one other thing, I know there's some politics up in here, because some people wanted to go to St. Jude's and stuff like that, and some people want Alabama State. And then, I don't know, I don't have opinion one way or the other. I know I was over here at Alabama State, fought some good battles here and whatever. I guess my only question would be, how much control would black people continue to have over it and all that? I don't trust the Alabama State government and none of them, and I don't trust Uncle Tom's. So I don't know if y'all people would Tom out or not, but it's enough room to put them everywhere. So no problem, no big deal. And we got to tell our own history.
Okay, is this working now? The question I have between you...
Oh, you put it back down.
No,
oh, okay. The homeless?
Yes, you don't have to give the wages.
Oh, just present. Well, the question I have, you identifying the kind of conflict, if you will, between between the more traditional folks of SCLC and the more, say, militant folks between SNCC. The question that I have, looking at the times, I'm wondering if the time would dictate some of the strategy where there were times it was appropriate to go a little slow, and there was a time when it was appropriate maybe to be a little more forceful. And when you look at people like Martin Luther King and some of the others, perhaps they were looking at a big picture there that you didn't have the guns to match the police of that day, and so it was just a matter of prudence to pull back at some time. Respond to that, please.
No problem. I'm glad to see some young looking faces coming up here. Yeah, come on in, young folks. Well, when SNCC formed, and Martin King and Ellen Baker put us together. And Ellen Baker was a part of the Montgomery Movement Association also. Y'all heard of Ellen Baker?
Yes.
Well, Ellen Baker, when they called us to Raleigh, North Carolina, and we sit down, and Martin King had probably be the finance. And we all got together, and Martin King wanted us to be a youth group under him. And Ellen Baker told us, said, y'all young people need your own autonomy, because y'all don't want to be young folks under them preachers. You don't want to be under them preachers. Start your own autonomy. And that's how we started the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Now, y'all know them preachers can talk. And SCLC was made up of a bunch of preachers. And that SNCC went out, and we went and we started attacking. When we went to Mississippi, Martin King told us, that's too dangerous. Y'all don't need to go there. And we went. And later on, but SNCC was militant. It would attack anywhere. No place was too dangerous. And we called it as we saw it. And a lot of people tried to compromise and what have you. So that brought us into a great conflict sometime with Dr. King. But we worked side by side. And I can say I didn't love a man and didn't learn more of a man. And a man didn't show me more love and respect than Martin King. So we fought in the daytime and part of the night. And I remember one time Martin King, when we had this, brought people to Selma and got our helmets, Martin King had to come over here from Selma and try to cool us down. And when he came over here, we had a group out there by the Benmore Hotel, and Martin King walked by some little girls and told the little girl they had the helmets on. And Dr. King said, young lady, those are some mighty daring helmets you have there. And the girls looked up to him and said, you need one, they hit you on your head. And Dr. King turned to them and said, Willie Rich told you to say that. And he called a meeting in Mr. Say's house and came over there and he preached to me, Willie Rich, you can't hurt me. I was Martin King before you were Willie Rich. King killed his brother Abe, but it didn't hurt him or he preached. But I'm saying that the young people saw it a different way. It wasn't nothing too dangerous, and we wanted change, and we couldn't wait. And we fought, and we took Martin King them to battle. We took Martin King them to battle. Hold up, my daughter. We took Martin King and those to battle, and he learned a lot from us. We learned a lot from him, and before Dr. King died, he wrote a book called Why We Can't Wait. And he made a speech so militant on April 4 of 1967 and called America the greatest terrorist nation in the world, called for a redistribution of all the wealth, and called America the greatest perpetrator of violence, and talked about that black unity so strong that on that day the United States government made a decision, said we got to kill Martin King. And they killed him on the anniversary that he made that speech on April 4 of 1967. So we were all in a learning process, and we were fighting against some wars, and that we fought them wars in different ways, and sometimes we fought each other over how we gonna fight the wars, but we were fighting the wars, and we came together, and before it was over, we see that the only real freedom that we will ever find is the total liberation and unification of Africa. We need total independence if we want to be a people.
That's a good part to take a break.
you know, and what SNCC did was a two-pronged strategy that made it possible for King to get whatever he could get. That was my whole argument around open Alabama State. You need people in the streets. Street heat, marching, protesting, picketing, develop the critical mass and conscious raising. You got to have a strategy. SLC really didn't have a strategy. SNCC, we met all day, all night, all for a week. Go to sleep and wake up 2 hours right on point. We strategized as a collective. SNCC they were too spontaneous, for me anyway. They created, as far as I'm concerned, organizationally, confusion. It was like they liked confusion. We battled, but they liked confusion. For instance, they didn't even know how folks could go to the bathroom on March. What about the toilets? That's logistics. SNCC was very logistical. Mikasa is being kind. Mikasa was SNCC's advanced man. He went out there before we decided to go. He looked at the lay of the land. Came back, gave us, you know, an assessment. Where the police department is, and this, that, and the other. SLC in the main was too top-heavy, too preacher-oriented. And Dr. King ended up saying, other than, you know, and Mikasa's preached at all, and Riverside Church at all, that Dr. King said, I understand the concept of black power.
So you said Diane Nash and those were not relevant to the organization of the Alabama movement, in particular, the settlement of Montgomery.
Just one second. Boy, Diane Nash was a member of SNCC. So SNCC, wherever SNCC was, if a SNCC person was in Mississippi fighting, I was fighting in Mississippi. So Diane Nash at that point early on was a part of SNCC. So she was one in Montgomery, but her husband James Belfer was in Montgomery. Well, she was. Yes, you know, we fought all over. But let me just say this. Martin, all of us were fighters, and we were warriors. Dr. King was a warrior. I mean a great warrior, a good warrior, strong warrior. Dr. King was tough. Because anytime Dr. King walked into a town, that town didn't really get tore up. But let me just make the last point. And that when SNCC, at the point when the mass set of people after Black Power started burning down these cities, and SNCC endorsed it, the rebellions and fighting and throwing firearms and fighting in Detroit, Newark, we said when we endorsed that and that was happening, and the United States government couldn't control the win against the war in Vietnam, then this government, they started running the King saying, let's negotiate, let's make a deal, let's do this, and whatever. But they would rather talk to Martin than to talk to us. And sometimes Martin would tell them, well, if you don't listen to me, you listen to SNCC. And they would give whatever. So our movement worked together in different ways. But yes, SNCC spoke out against the war in Vietnam. SNCC supported when these cities started burning down. And SNCC just saw the criminal behavior of the United States starting imperialism. Martin taught us about imperialism. And then when we looked at imperialism and saw how they killed millions of people in Africa, Asia, South America, how they lied like they killed Saddam Hussein, how they made up lies and went and killed Gaddafi and Libya and 500,000 other people. And we see that it ain't a nickel of a difference between a Democrat or a Republican. All of them fight for white power and white domination and imperialism. Whether it's Kerry or Bush. And matter of fact, I like to say that Reagan, Hitler, and Obama are the same. The only difference is the name.
We don't want to get too far behind the time, and we need to make sure we have ample time at the end for questions and answers, for a Q&A session. So let's continue with our second panel. Let's continue with our second panel. Before we do that, though, do we have student activists in the audience? We'd like to recognize you, acknowledge your presence from this period, from any period, really. Activists. Some of you left, okay. Barbara Howell, don't you in that group? Shining Christ Burger. Who else? From that period. I like Dorothy Minnie McCants, okay.
She was one of the freedom sisters.
I'm ready, we ready.
This panel is about Alabama State University and the voting rights movement, ASU. Our moderator is Miss Mary Ellen Noone, who was a student at Alabama State, and Ms. Dorothy Frazier, who was also a student at Alabama State. And let me tell you a little bit about her. Dorothy Frazier emerged as the most charismatic and important student leader at Alabama State University in 1965. She was part of a small group of committed young people who fomented student protests both before and after the Selma to Montgomery March. She worked with the Montgomery Improvement Association as a high school student. She became active with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, when she was a student at Alabama State. Our other panel participant is Doug McCants, who also attended Alabama State University in 1965. He worked also with SNCC. He was a defiant student leader. And he participated in voting rights protests leading up to the Selma to Montgomery March. In April 1965, after the march, McCants participated in demonstrations on campus that resulted in the occupation of the Alabama State University President's office, Dr. Levi Watkins. We all remember him, I'm sure. Okay, Mary?
Thank you. Good morning. We are so honored to be able to come and share our stories with you, because if we should not continue to pass these stories on, then this is a history that soon will be forgotten. I urge you to share and to participate, and if you have questions, please feel free. I want to kind of set the setting for that time here on Alabama State's campus. We were part of 3 different projects. I was listening to the brother before us. It took all of these organizations to make us as successful as we were. There was not just SNCC, there was not just SPLC, there was not just the Montgomery Improvement Association. It was a beautiful sharing of different experiences that brought us, like you would in your own family, you know, that there's going to be some dissension, but the overall goal for all of us was freedom, and we worked hard and we did. What I want to share with you young sisters and brothers today is that you got to take this torch. You got to pass it on to the next generation, and you got to be involved, because voter suppression is real. It is my honor to introduce both of my friends. These are my friends. We all grew up in this community together, and it's just a wonderful thing to still be involved at this time in our lives. So at this time, it is my pleasure and an honor to present to you Ms. Dorothy Frazier and Mr. Doug McCants. They're going to share their stories, and then I'm going to add in some things. And I would like to get some feedback from the students here on campus if there are questions after we have completed the presentation.
Well, you know, I'm so honored to be back at Alabama State. Is it on? Like Willie Rich said,
You know, we didn't have microphones, we just hollered it out. This is my alma mater. I love Alabama State. I was born where your stadium is now, over there with Studi Street. I went to nursery school on Hall Street. So Alabama State has always been in my blood. I am so fortunate to be a part of the Alabama State family until I bought some shoes. When you get up, you might see I have hornets on my shoes. And as I was telling my brother that, he said today, oh, now you get a chance to wear them. But little does he know, I've been wearing them when I attended the Tuskegee and the Alabama State game. So these shoes have a lot of miles on them. Well, I really don't know where to start. I just want to say, you want to start with the
I
question?
can ask you a question.
Yes, I think that would be
Okay. The first thing I wanted to ask you was that if you would talk about the early introduction to racial discrimination as a child growing up here in Montgomery.
Wow, I have several stories. I remember over in Normandale, I think it was Normandale, I'm not sure, but that was a grocery store over there, and there was this white woman that was sampling soft drink, and I wanted some. And she said to me, in these words or something similar, we don't give it to niggas. And there were two little white girls standing off to the side, and they were laughing at me. I mean, really laughing. And so I ran away, and I found my mother, and I was crying. And I said, I wished I was white. I wished I was white. Thank you. My mother slapped me so hard. I ran out of the store, ran in the car where my father was, crying. And I didn't tell him the whole story, but when my mother got back in the car, she told him what had happened. She said she was sorry, but she had to shock me to tell me that being a Negro wasn't a bad thing. That was only one incident. Another one was an incident on Fairview. It was a service station. And my father got out to get some gas. And so I wanted some water. So I got out the car to go get a drink of water. Again, a white woman comes out. Niggas don't drink out of this faucet or something like that. So my parents at that point, they had to tell me what side was up because I needed to know. Now, part of my life, I grew up in Montgomery. I was born in Montgomery, but I was also raised in Chicago on the South Side. And there I could go to the museum. I could go to the zoo. But in Montgomery, I couldn't do any of those things because I was a Negro. And I just diverse a little bit, get back to this point. After she came out, and told me niggas can't drink out of this water fountain, she came out with some Ajax and washed that water fountain off. To this day, I do not use Ajax. I don't care if they're gonna set it up any other can. I don't use Ajax, because in my child's mind, I'm a nigga, because this woman washed this fountain off. So, with those stories in mind, I certainly found out real early that here in Montgomery, I had to walk a very thin line. And so basically, that was my early recollection of why, you know, the difference between being an African-American person and a white person.
You were very instrumental on Alabama State University's campus in terms of your protests. And I was wondering, where did this energy come from and how did you first get involved?
Well, the energy came because my family has a very long history in the state of Alabama and especially in Montgomery during the 1955 bus boycott. At that time, we would have mass meetings. We attended Hope Street Baptist Church. Gwen and I were church members. And I remember one evening, Dr. King came to speak at our church. And I was sitting on the front row. And after Dr. King finished, Dr. King picked me up. I'll never forget his hands. They were so soft. So that was part of it. The MIA was a part of my life from a very young age, I would say 1955. I remember when my parents went to the King home that was bombed. And when they came back, I knew there was a change. There was a change in them. So I knew about MIA. I would attend some of their meetings. And so I would listen. And usually I would be one of a few children that were attentively listening to find out about the differences in what they were planning in Montgomery, and then with their voter education schools. Their voter education schools were very important. I think they have one over there by St. Jude or something. And they would teach, and black people couldn't vote. And so I'm listening, and I'm taking all of this in. So I started at a very young age in my family. They didn't hide anything, because during the 1955 bus boycott, I remember my father had a 1955 green Chevrolet, boy, and how they would take people to work, home. Black folks walked. We didn't have Adidas. We didn't have all these shoes we have today. They walked. So sometimes I would ride in the car with, you know, my father when he would pick up people to take them from place to place. So it started very, very young with me. And the ministers, Dr. Say, Reverend Say, Dr. A.W. Wilson, all of these people I knew very personally and would listen to stories. And even with Dr. King, when Rick was really right about Dr. King, he wasn't as aggressive as sick people, maybe because of his age. I can truly understand where he was, because I'm at that age. He wasn't as old as I am, but as you grow up, you learn. But MIA was a very intrinsic part of my life. And in fact, when I graduated from Carver High School on Fairview, they offered me a scholarship to go to Auburn University. So my mom and I went to Auburn University, you know, we just happened, it was $500. So I went on campus and we were touring one of the dorms. And as we were touring the dorms, again, here comes some white girls. Nigga, we don't want niggas here. I told them, I can't go to school here. I can't do that. I mean, I would get in trouble if I went to that school. So finally she said, well, where do you want to go? So we rode down the road, Tuskegee. So I paid my $10. I was going to go to Tuskegee. Then I guess she thought, well, we don't have the money, so drive through. So finally we came on, I was already accepted, you know, at Tuskegee and also at Alabama State. So I ended up at Alabama State, which I am so grateful that I attended Alabama State University.
I am too.
Thank you.
I just want to give you a little backdrop on where we were, you know, because it brought up some things that I remember too during that period, because my mama would always take me to the mass meetings. And it was just, you know, like we couldn't talk, we could just sit and listen. And one of the things that I remember Dr. King saying, even back then, was that in order to have power, then we must be able to vote. So that is how this whole energy started, is that there were classes that our parents could attend so that they could learn all of the information that was necessary in order to, you know, to be eligible to vote. And I remember Miss Idessa Williams, who I hold so dear to my heart, and Mr. Rufus Lewis, and those were the ones who coordinated throughout Montgomery and made sure that, you know, that our parents had the necessary information in order to. Except the thing was that even after, with all of this, with all of the training and all of the knowledge, the first time my mom said they went down, they were asked to say the preamble to the Constitution. But the good thing was that they knew it because they had been trained, you see. So that was the difference then. You know, I'm looking at you guys now and how easy it was. Or like my grandmama said, they would have like a mason jar with dried black-eyed peas in it. And they would ask you, in order for you to even be considered today, you gotta tell us how many peas are there in this jar.
How many feathers in the chicken?
How many what?
How many feathers in the chicken?
How many feathers in the
How many
chicken?
seeds in the watermelon?
Yes. How many seeds in a watermelon?
Then they come to your house at night and go to your house for business.
You hear? You hear my brother? So you see, so these are the things that, you know, you all now would probably just take for granted. But it was so difficult, you know, at that time for our parents and for us. And especially my grandmother, who could not read or write, you know. So, you know, we have all of this energy, and that was why Doug and Doug and those were so instrumental in all of these organizations. And I said, we couldn't have done, you can't, listen, you gotta have your left hand and your right hand. So all of these organizations under one umbrella made it possible for us to get where we are in terms of our ability to vote at this point in time. Just want to interject that. I'm going to get back on task. My next question to you is if you could discuss your initial contact with the work with the Montgomery Improvement Association. Was that your first initial contact, Art? Do you remember?
In 1955.
In 1955. Exactly.
I was here.
And also I wanted to ask you, how did you get involved with the student demonstrations? How in the world did that start,
You know, it wasn't a large jump. It was a very small. I like their ideology. They were for action.
Honestly, was the time here on campus?
Well, before that, when I walked on this campus, I knew it was different from the University of Alabama. And rest his soul, President Watkins, I knew he had a job, he had to do it, but our campus was not like the University of Alabama. And so, I like to say I got busy. And then when I met SNCC, people like Larry Fox, remember Larry? I think he's in New York. That's the last time I heard of him. North Carolina?
That's where you're from.
Oh, okay, I didn't know. Well, anyway, I knew that they were young, and I liked the message was said earlier, we definitely listened. And I knew about the president's house, old president's house, the white building, that was a student union. And we used to place cards there, and I got really proficient in big quiz. I was good at that. Now, we were playing cards, but we were also talking. We just weren't playing cards. It was almost like we had to do that because we didn't have some kind of way of meeting our, we would get back to President Watkins. So we had these little clandestine time card sessions up there in that old building. And then later on, when we saw that and we heard about what was all, and a lot of us knew what was going on with Gandhi. That's something else I want to bring up too. We were well-learned children because we read a lot. And they were having problems over there with the British, and we were having problems over here with white people in America, and it just wasn't a large jump for me. And when I heard Rick speak, I knew that was for me. And so I joined SNCC, and then I had people that I knew from Carver High, which was Leon Hall, and then I met Doug McCants. He was a handsome young devil. He was a radical. He was. You just a grown to be mellowed out. But he was there and he would speak. And it was just something that I knew I had to do. Because one thing that I always told my parents, why should I get an education if I'm going to be a second-class citizen? I didn't need that. So I decided in myself that this was an organization that I needed to be involved with. We would hold our meetings even out of the city. Sometimes we would go to Atlanta. We would meet over in Vine City. We would meet in warehouses. I mean, we did a lot of meetings that our parents didn't even know anything about. We were traveling and planning and organizing. There were students on this campus, and I have to say this. Some of them did not participate, and I understood that. Because some of their parents didn't want them murdered. They didn't want them to be jailed. My parents didn't want it either, but I don't think they had a choice. I didn't want it. No, I did. And they knew, because I come from a family that my family had their own, my mother's family had their own school in Pike County, Alabama, because they couldn't go to school with white folk either. So they started their own school. So what I'm saying to you, they understood. My father understood. And that's how I got involved with them. Is there something else you want to ask me before I go back in? Okay. For those of you that have seen this brochure, I hope all of you all will get this brochure. And if you look very closely, I'm that 18-year-old girl that's in front. And there's a man in back with a black hat. Little did I know that when I was marching, and this is what, I had to get permission to bring this on campus, by the way. There's a big sign out there, no firearms. But Dr. Robinson did get permission.
It's unloaded.
It's unloaded. I removed the bullets. And I'll turn it this way. But my father, when we were marching, getting ready to go see the sheriff about him beating up our students, he was behind me with this revolver. I did not know this until many years later when we were talking. But what he said to me was, no white man was going to beat up my daughter. And I never knew that. I didn't know it until later that my father took this gun with him. It was in a stabbage holster under his, I guess he wore it on this side right now. This gun, to me,
forgive me. This gun would have saved my life, but it might have gotten my father killed. And this very picture with this man and that black hat was protecting his child. That's why my father and mother did not mind if I went out and I demonstrated. And I also want to tell you something. I have one brother. Oh, I'm sorry. I have one brother. I hope you all heard all of that. But I have one brother. I graduated in August of '68. I was on a bus going to Detroit, Michigan that Sunday. And the reason I was shipped off so fast is because I had almost been killed 3 times in the state of Alabama. And if I stayed here, my parents were afraid that I would be killed. My brother, who's in the audience today, could not even talk. He couldn't even speak my name. I just found out about this, I think, a year or 2 ago. He just told me. He was a little kid. And he had to not speak my name and let people know where I was for fear somebody would tell. Now for me, with a child keeping that secret for all of these years, that's something I didn't know. So, being at Alabama State, being a citizen of the United States of America, I still wasn't. It just didn't affect me, it affected my entire family. So, I can sit here today to say to the young people that's in this audience, the struggle does not end. Well, shortly after this was taken, and I told Dr. Robertson about this, but I think you might have a copy. This is one of the original mimeograph sheets of that meeting with Dr. Martin Luther King and people that's on that front line. I'm going to donate this to Alabama State University.
Yes.
I'm not going to, at one point I thought about the King Center, but I'm glad I didn't do it because they always fighting over there about something. This is one of the original, this is the original photograph of this picture. Okay, I have that. It's been hanging on my wall. All of these artifacts have been through fire, flood. Am I right? A little bit of homelessness. But I managed to save these artifacts, and I have saved them for a reason. You know, it's a sad thing that we're back to where we were. It's a bad thing. I live in the state of Georgia. I tell my husband all the time, I got married. My husband is Spanish. He never experienced racism until he moved to Georgia. You know, most folks think all Spanish people are Mexicans, where they're not. He's not. So, racism is alive, it is well, and it's dangerous. And for all you students that are in this room today, and if you don't understand that, and I'm sure that you do because you're at this symposium, let your friends know. It ain't but one thing that's going to get you out of being discriminated in America, and that is death. And that might not be because if you die, sometimes certain cemeteries you can't be buried in. But it is a very important thing that we understand where we came from. You want to continue with your next question?
I want to ask you, I want you to talk about the day that the Alabama State University students went to jail. And I want you to expound on Timothy Mays.
Thank you.
Timothy Mays and Doug.
Oh my God. Timothy Mays, from Selma to Montgomery, that march, that evening, it was spent on, they stayed on the maize land, thousands of people. And it was raining, you know, remember, it flooded down there. I didn't do the entire march because some of the student leaders, we had to be in Montgomery. We had to organize. So I was driven down. And we had lieutenants. We had people and lieutenants. We had, people that were secretaries. We were very, very organized. But Timothy Mays' family owned that land coming from Selma to Montgomery. Timothy was a very good friend of mine. He passed away in 2005, and I probably am going to donate what he wrote about me to Dr. Robinson. I do have that paper with me also. But Timothy was a crusader. In fact, on this very picture, there's an American flag. That was Timothy Mays. Yeah, he kept that flag. So we were carrying flags long before other folks out here was carrying flags. Timothy kept that flag. I don't know what happened, with his beneficiaries. I don't know what they did with that flag, but Timothy Mays was a very important student at Alabama State. I just can't say enough about Doug. Doug was the organizer. And Doug had a way about him that you knew he meant business. He wasn't the kind of person talked a lot, but when he said something, you needed to listen to it. Because he did not stand for any shucking and jiving. We had a mission over here. We had to follow through on that mission. And Doug was that person. I would say if Doug was in the military, he'd probably be a 5-star general. Because even though Willie Rich said he was the president for a week at Alabama State, I believe Doug was the president ever since when he stepped on campus. So Dr. Watkins, and I'm just going to say it, Dr. Watkins had a daughter, and she hopes she's still alive, Darstine Watkins. Darstine had to be real cool with her stuff because she was the president's daughter. But we had an eye in the house. We did. We had an eye in the house. And Dr. Watkins, poor man, I knew he suffered a lot. And I have to mention another person. I saw his name on the building. Dr. G. Garrett Hardy. I'm a sociology major. I have a psychology minor. I didn't come over here to be that. I wanted to actually be a lawyer. But when I came here, Dr. Hardy, I kind of went around and talked to all the professors. So Dr. Hardy set me down in his office and we were talking, and I kind of think I was brainwashed. I think I was. And that's how I became a sociology major under Dr. G. Garrett Hardy. I never will forget that man. He was a true humanitarian. And all of my life, when someone asked me, who are my mentors? I'm saying, first of all, my parents, and the next person I'm going to say would be Dr. G. Garrett Hardy of Alabama State College at that time. But I'm so proud that I got an opportunity to be under Dr. G. Garrett Hardy. I tell you, there were some professors over here that always wanted to what? Fail. Because most of us was always out there demonstrating. We weren't in class half the time, but we were always there to make sure we took that test. And I know for me, Dr. Hardy would go to my professors and ask them not to fail me. Because what I was doing was for everybody. And I received 1 F. I believe that's still on my transcript in French. But the rest of the professors, they acquiesced to what Dr. Hardy was saying, and I made it out in 4 years. And I'm going to think of some more names over here that were instructors. But when I graduated, the day I graduated from Alabama State, Dr.
Watkins just singled me out. He said, Ms. Frazier, I want you to come to my office and let's have a talk. And I told him, I don't want to talk to you. You didn't talk to me for 4 years. Why should I talk to you now? So we were kind of praising, but I felt kind of bad about that. So years later, I came on campus and I did have a meeting with Dr. Watkins. And I do understand Dr. Watkins in that I have a file in the president's office. Have you seen it? It's one there. Because my son attended Alabama State and I think he came here in 84, 85, and the president then, I can't think of his name, asked him, was he going to be like his mother? I don't know what that meant. But those are some names, Donna Smith, Laura Richards. I also I'm going to be donating another artifact. She wasn't a student that was out there with us, but she always kept notes for me. And I took her to a mass meeting where Dr. King was speaking. She had the good fortune of having him sign the program for that evening. So I called her, I think back in December when we started to talk, to ask her to send me a copy. She has the original, but I do have a copy. So I didn't realize I had all these artifacts, but as I keep going, you can't get the gun. You can't get the gun, but some of the other originals, like this one with everybody's signature on the back, John Lewis and everybody, Jim Foreman. So basically, that's it.
One more question, and I'm just going to throw this out to both of you. What was the reason behind the protest, the student protest on campus?
Can you hear me? Yes. I really need this, actually. First of all, I'd like to thank the National Center for allowing us to come and share some of our experiences back during the day, particularly 1965, March 1965, which to me is probably the most important and most significant month of all the other incidents involving civil rights. We feel that from 1965, 64, 65, all the bills were passed, all the things that occurred in March 65. What happened here at ASU as a student is what you probably, the students in particular, are probably most concerned with and would like to hear more about. Somewhere in, sometime in early March or late February, I'm sure it was early March, I met Dr. Frazier and Timothy Mays. They were freshmen. I was beginning my junior year. I saw them going around the campus trying to stir up. I realized that well, these are just freshmen and they're willing to take the plunge. I've been here for the past couple of years and I certainly know more about what's actually happening here that day. So I approached them and that was the beginning of the protest movement here at ASU. Not the first time. I was just a follow-up from the earlier years when Bernard Lafayette, Watts, and some others, they started in 62. And actually, we were just following up on some of the same things that they had been involved in. Biggest problem we were having, among the problems we were having over here at ASU were you didn't know when you were going to graduate. You think you're going to graduate, you say, oh, you owe money. Registration was a disaster. I mean, you walked around for weeks and thinking you were in school. If you lived in the dorm, you lived in conditions that looked like slave quarters. You was eating food out of the dining hall that, I mean, wasn't very delectable. Certainly wasn't very, it was edible, that's about it. But nobody was pleased. Everybody was unhappy. And it was at the end of the Trump administration, because they brought Dr. Watkins in, because they fired Turner and they also fired Drake over at A&M, particularly, especially because Howard and Lee said that these presidents couldn't keep us in our place. Excuse me. So this is how everything started. And so we began to speak to the students on campus. We began to, they started to listen. One time they actually listened and they followed up. SNCC came in, assisting us. We started having kids come out of the dormitories. We studied at the president's office and his house. And McCants mentioned something about the police shooting. Well, the police fired their weapons because I was in front and there were several people in the back. The police were kind of in the middle. And they started throwing bottles. And people were getting hit by the bottle. Actually, were throwing at the police. So the policemen in fear of their own safety, they pulled their weapons out. I think one of the sergeants or something told them to go ahead and fire into the air. All right, I got a top of an automobile, and I screamed to everybody, listen, you hardheads in the back, you need to stop throwing the bottles before you get someone killed. During that same time, you had a state, Al Lingo, who was, I think, over state troopers. He had told the president that he was going to come in and straighten this mess out. So Dr. Watkins been, in fear of the state troopers coming in, particularly with Al Lingo's history, posse from Selma and Harris and what have you, and Birmingham in particular. He went to the governor, and this is in his first 114-year book. You read his papers over there in archive, and please go there and use it. It's a beautiful facility that I'm sure is going to grow and be something very important in terms of hopefully a clearinghouse of civil rights in this state. And people and scholars will hopefully come from all over the world to view those files and once they get the organized. You can't right now, you can't even Google what happened here in 1965. And that's not right. We need to get on that. That's something that needs to be done, but that requires programs and what have you. Anyway, getting back to Al Lingo and Dr. Watkins. Lingo said that I can straighten out this mess. Watkins was very fearful of our safety, He was, in fact, but among others. Faculty, bystanders, anybody could have got hurt in the situation. He went to see Governor Waters. Governor Waters, wanted to know, what can I do? So President Watkins suggested that to the governor that he could get some black policemen. We had white policemen on campus. And the governor says, well, where are you going to get them from? We don't have any black policemen. And that's what we did, not in Montgomery. But Mobile had some black policemen. So the governor said, well, you think you can get them? He said, yes, but I need them like yesterday. Because Al Lingo was ready to move in with the state troopers. So the governor says, well, I can use my plane. The governor's private plane, oh yeah. So he got the governor's private plane, he went to Mobile, flew to Mobile, he talked to the policemen, they went on and on about it, and they finally agreed to come. With the assurances that Montgomery police and state troopers were not in the field. So they came to campus, we were all glad to see them. That saved probably a lot of lives, if not at least a lot of injuries. And we eventually, there's a resolution passed in the House, the Senate, I think, combination to commend those policemen for coming here. They actually had to spend the night in the basement of the first president's house here, the White House. And of course, we thought the president was there. We were sleeping on his doorstep and making noise all night long because he was taking him. And he was gone to a hotel. They moved him out. It didn't matter. It was the symbolism that was more important. The same night that we spent the day and night in the president's house, in the occupied cities, we sat in his office. And as he got very late, he met from the police when they wanted to bring him to jail.
You had outside, about all the girls out, and
Oh, yeah, well, we emptied the dorm. For the students, we emptied the dorm. Everybody came out of the dorm. Female, male dorm, the mattresses, everything came out. We slept on the street. And these were the kind of things that showed the unity and how, in fact, the students themselves were affected by the policies and the conditions that they were having to try and get educated under. And these conditions were very, very bad. We thought that Watkins, as the president, should have been more assertive to the legislature and the governor to upgrade these standards here. And today